Hello once again, ladies and gents, Fishbat here, and this time I have gotten a better microphone, so my voice should be nicer and clearer than ever. So that's nice. Kings of War once again, Ogres versus Elves. I'm taking on these Elves again. I will beat them eventually. 2,000 points, and it's a dominate scenario this time. I don't think I've shown a dominate scenario on the channel, so here we go. Let's get right into it. Here are the notations that I use for my videos. Pause if you need to. These explain my notation system for the battle report. So let's begin by introducing the Ogre army that I brought to the table. Firstly, we have a horde of warriors, the sword and board kind, or axe and board, if you will, which are just a pretty solid all-round block. For 200 points, they don't have a lot of nerve though. The two-handed warriors, which in previous games I've fielded as regiments, this time I'm fielding one horde of them. I think that'll be better because I've had problems with the regiments just folding too easily. The low nerve of 12-14 is just low enough that something with medium strength can charge right in and knock them out, so I'm hoping that in the horde formation it's cheaper for the same amount of damage, and it's one unit that's a bit tougher as well, so I'm hoping that's going to perform better. And then I've got shooters, and I'm taking them in a horde as well. I had a look and I decided that the 80 points for double the damage was what I needed to bring. The 9 attacks was a bit too weedy, and so I'm trying out the horde formation this time. Boomers, they are staying with the regiment though. Just keeping them up as close fire support. They can run and gun, do all those nice things. Berserker Braves, regiment of 3. You've seen these before, lots of attacks. And another unit of the same. I have my Warlock to go alongside the Berserker Braves to benefit from the... It used to be called the Bloodlust rule, but it just says that he gains an additional dice for each unit of Berserker Braves within 6. So that pumps that Fireball 12 up to Fireball 14, and the Lightning Bolt 3 up to Lightning Bolt 5, which is formidable. Army Standard Bearer, just to keep everyone inspired, not running away, and he has the Warbow of Kaba just to fill out the last 5 points of the list. Red Goblin Blaster, a favourite. This is... I plan to keep him at the backfield this game, just to dissuade anything from being really tricky and getting around behind me and doing all those sorts of nasty things. So he'll be protecting my backfield this game. The Giant, the closest thing that I have to an anchor for my Ogres. He's actually got a pretty good nerve there, 17-19 for 190 points. Decent crushing strength as well, so I'm going to stick him somewhere tricky and use him as an anchor. Finally, Grok Agamok, the beat stick himself. I'm definitely a fan of this guy. Any 2,000 point game, I wouldn't mind bringing him, so he's in. Finally, and I do need to take pictures because I've painted them now, I have both troops of Red Goblin Scouts, and I have painted them both up by now. Now to my opponent's army and deployment. Okay, so going left to right, we have a troop of Palace Guard, and another one over on the far right side. Both of those being used as little chaff units, but for chaff units, these guys are actually pretty durable. Like, you need to be able to put 6 damage on them before they're going to be in reasonable threat range, assuming you roll a 7. And they do pretty good damage, 10 attacks hitting on 3s, crushing strength 1. So they're fast, they hit okay, they're reasonably resilient. And they're going to stop me from being able to charge anything bigger of his. Right in the middle there we have his Elven King, mounted on a horse to give him that speed, and then Blade of the Beast Slayer, which gives him another bonus, an extra 2 crushing strength against large infantry and monsters, and almost the entirety of my list, apart from my Red Goblin Scouts, are large infantry and monsters, so he is properly equipped for this game. Up the back there, some new Silver Breeze cavalry models that he got. He's just trying them out this game, hasn't used them before, and they have a very low damage to points output. They really depend on being manoeuvred into the right spot to be able to attack the right targets. A little bit like a mage with Lightning Bolt in that respect. So he really wants to take advantage of that speed 10 and the nimble. Well, going left to right, another troop of Palace Guard, then the second one right in the middle. Beside them is the Army Standard Bearer, who's on a horse, just to keep everyone inspired. And behind them, and to their left, 2 2 regiments of Stormwind Cavalry, the one on the left with the Caterpillar Potion. So the 2nd Regiment is another unit that my opponent has just gotten. He's busting all these new cavalry models out, trying to go really fast, I suppose. These guys, they hurt. That 9-inch speed means that they're faster than other cavalry. Hitting on 3s elite, they put on some serious pain. Moving further left, we have another troop of Palace Guard, then the Elven Mage, which is mounted on a horse and given Bane Chant, which will invariably be used on those archers to give them another bit of piercing, and the dreaded horde of Kindred Archers with the Heart-Seeking Chant. So between them and the Mage, they are putting out a withering amount of damage every single turn. They are dangerous, and I do not like them. Speaking of things I do not like, here is a horde of Dracon Riders with the Pipes of Terror. These guys make my life very difficult indeed. The speed 10, the fly, it's so hard to be able to arrange my force as I advance so that I don't create some opening for them to exploit. They hit like a truck when they go in, and like they'll get an average of 11 damage or something on most units. And I need to be able to offer them either chaff or something that will survive that 11 damage. And that's challenging to do. And to offer it in a way that won't give them a flank on the subsequent turn to just tear up the rest of the army. So that whatever they charge will be supported. So they are definitely the scariest thing on the board from my perspective. And a lot of what I do will be sort of jostling to try to respond to them, and we'll see how I go. And here's just a close-up of these villains. Those very, very handsome elven villains. Now looking at my deployment of Ogres, over in the corner I have put my Horde of Shooters. This was one of my first drops, and accordingly my opponent put almost nothing directly opposite them. Then further along we have a unit of Red Goblin Scouts, a troop just on that side of the forest. I put them there because I had hoped they would run interference in case anything was coming to the shooters. There'd be a bit of protection there. Moving further along, we have the Giant hiding behind the forest. Being tough and with Strider, he just likes being around terrain because he can charge right through it and does not care one bit. Then the Standard Bearer to bear the standard and keep everyone inspired near him. The Horde of Warriors, sword and board, with Red Goblin Scouts in front of them, a bit of protection. The Regiment of Boomers. I put them there because I thought that was a likely spot that something flying might try to come around, so they'd be able to respond. Grok Agamok behind them. He also is a beatstick. He can take on most things, but because he is nimble, he also is pretty good to take on flyers as well. And if he does get a flank, which I ideally hope he does, then he'll be able to rip those Dracons apart. And just behind Grok Agamok there, you can see that I've got the Red Goblin Blaster, that big boom wagon. That is also going to be something to dissuade those Dracons from coming nearby, because if they come too close, I'm going to march that thing up and explode it and hopefully take a lot of those flyers down with that piercing 4 explosion. So yeah, all those 3 units in a row, the Boomers, Grok Agamok, the Boom Wagon, I've all put them there because I'm scared of those Dracons. Then we have on my left side, my opponent's right side, I've got a Horde of Warriors with the 2-handed weapons here, 2 regiments of Berserkers, the Warlock in the middle to benefit from his proximity to them for his spells. And this is what things look like at the end of deployment. You can see that we are both heavily weighted to the right side. I might be a little bit more on the centre, just because he has the Dracons and the Archers on the right there, which are such big threats. But those Dracons can move so quick that he's not really committed to the right flank either. He can really easily just move them to the centre. And my idea going into this is that I'm going to have a very cautious advance on my right near the Warlock. Cautious at the centre. Everything is cautious. I can't be reckless because he is faster than me. So I'm going to be hoping that I get turn 1 and then we'll sort of be able to define some of these fights, but let's see what happens. And the Elves get turn 1. So, first things first, the Dracons move up. Fairly conservative, they make sure that they are just out of the 12-inch charge range of my Berserkers, and they pivot a little bit so that they can see all of the juicy targets ahead of them. The Archers move forward a little bit, and then the Mage moves just behind the Archers, and the Palace Guard move in front of the Archers to protect them a little bit too. A general advance, we can see that the Lord is moving across from his position, rearranging himself. A few of the cavalry move forward into the forest so they can now see out of the forest. That particular unit has the Potion of the Caterpillar, so the forest isn't impeding them. And the other stuff, which just makes it, general move forward. The Mage Bane chants the Archers, who in turn shoot at my Berserker regiment and do 5 points of damage, but they hold. And then the Silverbreeze Cavalry let loose some arrows, do 5 points of damage to the Red Goblin troop, and they rout them. So, yeah, they've 155 point unit got a 100 point chaff unit down in one shot. I think they've done a decent job already. And that's the board state at the end of the Elven first turn. Ogres. So I've moved everything up. I've put my Warlock forwards because I want him to be able to fireball those Dracons. And then I've got the Berserkers held back a little bit so that they can support the Warlock if he is charged. I've moved my Warrior Horde forward so they can support the Berserkers. If they get charged, I've moved my Grokaggenwok across the forest so that he can support the Berserkers in front of him or the Warriors at the side if they are charged, and the Red Goblin Blaster is moving up as well so that it can respond. So every single movement I've done here on that flank is all about responding to that flyer because it is a threat to everything there. It absolutely is. Moving along, heading towards the centre, I've got a fairly limited movement from my Warrior Horde, my Standard Bearer, my Boomers. My Red Golems have come across a little bit. They've now stood in front of the Boomers. That was because I wanted to protect them from cavalry or from those Palace Guard troops. It was a bit of a foolish thing. I should have kept them off slightly to the left so that the Boomers could see the Palace Guard and I would have gotten a shot off and maybe hurt them a bit. But as it was, they were there and it was okay. I didn't show it in pictures either, but the Giant did advance as well. But the exciting thing is that those shooters, the regiment of them, not the regiment, the Horde, yes, the Horde of shooters shot at the Palace Guard troop over on that side, did 6 points of damage and wavered them, which made me happy because the regiment would never have done that, not in a month of Sundays. Then the Warlock, it did fireball, those Dracon Riders only did 3 points of damage though, so oh well. And this is how it all looks at the end of Ogre's first turn. So you can see that I've advanced and that my opponent is going to be able to choose a whole lot of charges. I've tried to arrange my left flank as best I could, but really he has the luxury of choice with that unit of Dracon Riders. He has a lot of stuff he can do and he can pick what is best for him. The Palace Guard have a few ways they could go. The cavalry as well, being so quick, they can just duck anywhere. The only stuff that I really know he's going to do is that those Palace Guard are just going to advance. Everything else is quick enough that it has a lot of options, and the Archers, of course, are very flexible in what they can choose for targets. So, Elven second turn. And it all happens. So, the Dracon Horde chooses the two-handed Warrior Horde as a target, flies in, 11 damage, and wavers them. And wavering was one of the worst results that could have happened. If they are, ideally they would have held and then they would have hit back really well and I would have been a very happy trooper. But that's unlikely. With 11 damage they would have needed, like a 5 on 2d6. Then if they had routed, then Grok would have had a clear charge in and I would have put in a big hurt on the Dracon Riders as well. Moving along, the Palace Guard troop charge into the Berserkers. They do 8 points of damage. They'd already taken 5 in the previous turn, and they are routed. And then the Archer Horde is Bane chanted by the Mage. Fire at the Warlock for 6 points of damage and rout them as well. So that flank has lost already 280 points worth of units, and another 200 point unit is wavering. So already that's not looking that good. It's that's close to a quarter of my army is in a bad way already. Then towards the middle, the Palace Guard unit charged the Red Goblin Troop Scouts. 5 damage, rout. I don't mind that. That's what they're there for, to take damage. The Lord charges into the Warrior Horde, give them 2 damage. The Silver Breeze Cavalry come forward, and I didn't expect this, but they shot the Red Goblin Blaster. But, you know, despite everything, and despite being so volatile, it does survive. It takes the 2 damage, and it just wears it. A further unit of Palace Guard, they don't charge the Giant, but they move just in front of it. They're moving there to restrict what he can do. That Giant's not going to be causing any troublesome flank charges. He's going to be getting stuck against that unit of Palace Guard. And that's the general board state at the end of the Elves' second turn. Now, Ogres again. So, we had this situation, and if I'll go to the next slide, I'll show you that this was a bit contentious. I thought that I would be able to charge the Dracon Riders with Grok Agamok. The Riders would certainly, when we measured it, it was definitely within his charge range and within his line of sight. He was also within the front arc of the Dracons. So I reasoned that because he has Nimble, he can take 2 pivots. One where he is now, 90 degrees to the left, down to the point at the bottom of the screen, then pivot again, and he would get safely into the front of the Dracon Riders doing nothing illegal. My opponent thought that since you need to take the shortest route possible, that he would need to go where the blue line goes, between the troop of Palace Guard and the Horde of Warriors, across the obstacle and into the flank. But the problem with that is it would require too many pivots, and that therefore the charge was impossible. We couldn't find a resolution at the time. We both thought we were right, so we rolled a d6 and decided that I would not be able to make the charge. I have since asked the question on the Mantic Forum, and the decision is that yes, Grok Agamok could definitely have made the charge. The blue line is not an option. He's in the front arc of the Dracon Riders, so he has to charge the front. And he has to take the shortest possible route for a possible charge. A charge with 3 pivots is not a possible route. And since the orange route works, yes, I would go that way. So, in future, I would have gotten that charge off. As it was, Grok Agamok instead charged the Palace Guard that were in front of him, did 7 points of damage and routed them. And then I had the Red Goblin Blaster move up to support those warriors, so that my thinking was that the Dracon Riders would charge them again, break them, and then they'd be sitting waiting for my blaster to just roll up and go boom. My Berserkers there on the left, they were in a tricky spot. I didn't want to turn them around, because if the Dracon Riders just flew away, they'd essentially have lost 2 turns to turning around and spinning and doing nothing. So I wanted to move forward and perhaps get some attacks on these archers, but I couldn't move forward and be safe from... You can't quite see it, but right at the top of the screen there's a regiment of Stormwind Cavalry, and they hurt, and I don't want my Berserkers to take a charge from them. So I move them forwards, and I think I'm being very clever. I'm out of the charge arc of the Stormwind Cavalry, but what I've done is I can no longer charge those archers without taking 2 pivots, and I only have 1. So I've lost a turn with them anyway, which is very foolish. And at least if I had moved forward and it had lured out those cavalry, then I could have flank charged them with Grok Agamok, or front charged them if they'd managed to win and then pivot. So, yeah, that was silly. That was a loss. moving towards the middle, we had lots of action. The boomers boomed at those Palace Guard, did 5 points of damage. The giant smacked another unit of Palace Guard with his sword for 2 points of damage and wavered them. Then in the middle, the warrior horde, those heroic warriors, they stroll up, do 5 points of damage to the Lord, and they rout him, even though he's got a 15 break limit. And is inspiring, because on the nerve test, they roll double sixes. And is inspiring. Should this stop them? No, they just roll double sixes again. Yes, double sixes, the event of the millennium. Working it out, that is a 1 in 1,296 chance of occurring. Double sixes. So that was absolutely phenomenal. More of that luck, please. And onto the other side of the board again. Those shooters, as you can see, they don't have many targets. Everything is quite a long way away. They've essentially only got the Palace Guard troop, the Silver Breeze, and maybe the Standard Bearer, but he's on a -1 to hit because he's individual. So they decide to shoot at the Silver Breeze, do 7 points of damage, and they rout them. Did I mention that I like having shooters in a horde? They are much better in a horde. Absolutely. Every day of the week, take them in a horde. Leave the regiment in the box. And here we can see some of the great tactical discussions going on amongst the boomers. So this is what is going on at the end of the Ogre's second turn. Left flank is in a bad way. The Berserkers are in a silly spot. The Warriors are wavering. Those Dracons could get into any number of annoying places. The centre's going okay though, so we'll have to see what happens. Elven turn 3. So, the Mage once again Bane chants those archers, and the archers shoot the warrior horde for 5 points of damage, and they evaporate, they disappear. The Dracons, for their part, I didn't realise they had them in the arc of sight, but they could actually see the boomers of the flank. And with 20 inches, they easily made it over there. So they flank charged the boomers, did 11 points of damage, didn't even need to roll for the Palace Guard who joined in the front. They were just out of there, even with the reroll from Grok Agamok. So I lost the warriors, I lost the boomers. So that left side of the board, that's really evaporated. In the middle, the Stormwind Cavalry, they come charging in. 8 points of damage to my warrior horde for a total of 10, but they hold on the reroll. Then along the rest of the board, the Palace Guard troop are not charging the giant because they're wavering. The Army Standard Bearer comes marching up because he wants to support the troops, and the other troop of Palace Guard advances so that it might be able to help a bit later. Ogre's turn 3. So I've got my Red Goblin Blaster in a pretty good spot. I move him up. He explodes, and I roll a 6, and it was like a millimetre away from also getting the Palace Guard unit, which would have been a big deal. As it was, though, it blew up, did 5 points of damage to those Dracon Riders, which, like, it helped, but, you know, I was sort of hoping for a bit more. Oh well. Now, the Dracon Riders had manoeuvred in such a way that Grok was in an awkward spot. Those Berserkers were going to take some damage. The Berserkers couldn't charge the archers, and when I realised this, my heart sank in my chest, and I realised what an idiot I am. So I decided the best thing I could do was to turn the Berserkers sideways, face the Dracon Riders, and move up Grok Agamok to support them, so that the Dracon Riders are not going to have an easy time of things, because they'd have to take some damage from Grok, was my thinking. All suboptimal, but it was the best I could do with scarce resources on a flank that had failed. Towards the middle, where things are actually going alright, the Warrior Horde charges into the regiment of Stormwind Cavalry, do 8 damage. Oh, they've also got another 1 damage because the Standard Bearer helped as well on the flank, and wavered the Stormwind Cavalry. The Giant goes in, does another 4 points of damage to the troop for a total of 6, and they are okay. They're just fine. And then the Shooter Horde. They get another troop in their sights. The Palace Guard, they shot in the first turn. Aim, fire, 4 points of damage for a total of 10, and they rout. Did I mention that Ogre Shooters are better than a Horde? Because they are. They really, really are. Elves turn 4. Okay, so now the centre is in trouble. The troop of Palace Guard get the flank on the warriors and do 10 damage for a total of 20 now, and so they are out. They are well and truly gone. The standard bearer moves a little bit across to support the troop of Palace Guard that have just moved in. The regiment of Storm Cavalry move a little bit back. And the Drakon Riders, their decision was that they were going to, instead of getting into a combat, jump over and get behind Grok Agamok, and perhaps be able to cause some mischief that way. So you can see here that perhaps Grok doesn't have the best perception in the world. The Archer Horde, Bane chanted by the Mage once again. I will note at this point that in the 3 games I've played against those elves, that the Mage has Bane chanted them every single turn without fail. He has not failed any of those Bane chant tests yet. He will one of these days, bloody elves. So yes, 3 damage onto my Berserkers, but the Berserkers, like the troops they are, like the good hearty ogres, they just plow on through. They can take 3 arrows. And that's how things are looking at the end of the 4th Elven turn. I am getting a really scarce board presence, and my opponent still has all these really big scary things left. So, Ogres turn 4. So now I'm really scraping, I think. The Giant moves in, does 3 points of damage to those Palace Guard for a total of 9, and they rout. So they're out of the way. Standbearer goes in, taps those Stormwind Cavalry for 2 damage, up to 9, but it's not enough. I routed them, but then I had to reroll for Inspiring, and they held. I moved in Grok Agamok and the Berserkers. Because of the angle the Drakons were on, they would not be able to be charged this turn. So they were safe, but in the long run, they were not in a good spot. I'm just hoping I can clean up something. That's sort of how the middle looks after all is said and done. And then I move my Ogre Shooter's Horde, because everything is moved so far away they no longer have targets. So I'm moving forward so that I, in the first place, am able to shoot things next turn. And if I'm really desperate... Actually, no, I was going to say if I'm really desperate, I can move them at the double to try and get towards the centre to dominate for the scenario, but I couldn't do that through the lake anyway, because it's difficult terrain. So, Elven turn 5. Things are starting to get really mopped up here. The Mage, once again, Bane chants the Archer Horde, and they do 10 damage to Grok Agamok, who actually survives because my opponent rolled low on the nerve. So that was pretty nice. Then the Palace Guard troop was down the bottom. They did actually have those Berserkers in their Arc of Sight, even though I didn't realise it. I need to measure these things more often because there's a lot of this Arc of Sight that I don't pick up on. But they get into the front, they do 3 points of damage for a total of 6. But they hold, so they do okay. What goes less well is that the Standard Bearer is attacked in the flank by another unit of Stormwind Cavalry, takes 10 damage, and he routs. He is out of there. The Giant takes a regiment of them from the front, takes 11 damage, but he holds, because my Giant is an anvil. And that's the general arrangement of things at the end of the turn. Ogres turn 5. So, shooters, they have a target now, and they do. They shoot the target for 3 points of damage, which doesn't do much. The Berserkers charge into the Palace Guard troop, do 9 damage and waver them, which on a lucky roll for my opponent. Grok Agamok charges into the rear of those cavalry, and, you know, Grok Agamok in the rear is just the dream. 21 attacks with Blast D3 and Crushing Strength 3. Oh yes. They already had a lot of damage on them, but we didn't even bother rolling the dice. There was no way that it wasn't going to be double ones. So we rolled and they routed. And that's how I arranged things. There was nothing I could do with Grok Agamok to make him safe from all of his opponents. Where he was, I've moved him forwards here. I haven't put the arrow in, but I've moved him forwards. he would not be able to protect his flank and his front. And in any case, he already had 10 damage, so he's not long for the world anyway. So I figured this way, the cavalry at least wouldn't get a charge on him, and maybe the Dracons would do something different. But yeah, they're not in a good spot. Elves turn 6. The Mage Bane Chants the Archer Horde once again, and the Archer Horde does 6 points of damage to that Berserker troop. And they are now on a total of 12. They only need 3 more points of damage before they rout. And my opponent rolls double ones. Hooray! They stay in the game! That was some really bad luck for my opponent. As a matter of fact, between my double 6 and his double ones, I've had pretty good luck this game, actually. Moving along though, his Dracons get my Grokagamok in the rear, and yeah, it's nasty. Lots of damage, and he routs. The other regiment of Stormwind Cavalry, they charge the Giant from the front, 5 more points of damage, total of 16, and yeah, he routs as well. So they're all gone. All I have left are my shooters, and because of some luck, that Berserker regiment. So, Ogre turn 6. The shooters trying to make up the best of what they can. They shoot at the regiment of Stormwind Cavalry for 3 points of damage. Actually, it couldn't have been 3 last turn, it must have been 2. Anyway, there were a total of 5 points of damage this turn, and it's not enough, they stick. The Berserkers, however, they charge into the Palace Guard troop, do lots of damage, and they rout them. So they've gotten rid of them now, which is very nice. So we roll for the 7th turn, and we don't get one, so that's the end of the game. So, time to tally up the scores, right? Well, turned out we had a bit of a disagreement about what we were tallying. I said that, Dominate, you have to count up the points of all the units within 12 inches of the very center point of the board. So it's a 12-inch radius around the center point, which we measure from that green dice there. My opponent, however, was under the impression that Dominate was the center of the board, meaning the center line of the board. So essentially, within 12 inches of that would mean the entire area between the deployment zones. The center line being, the 6-foot line that goes right up the middle of the board. Yeah, he thought that was it. And so everything between the deployment zones was the objective. We agreed to disagree, and I said, oh, well, whatever the case is, I'm pretty sure you've got me. But I have since checked this, and it is, in fact, from the center point, from the Mantic 2015 FAQ. So the units within that center point are my Ogre Regiment, the Berserkers, his Standard Bearer, though that, what do you call them, the Stormwind Regiment, and the Dracons are partially in, but your unit needs to be entirely within. And so that Dracon Horde is not entirely within, and so it does not count. So based on that ruling from the FAQ, I had 150 points in it, and the Elves had 280 points within it. Which makes it a draw, because he would have needed to have 350 in order to beat me. So there we go. I didn't beat the Elves, but I drew, which is good enough. And I had 2 units on the end of the table. So hooray. I will make the point, though, that although it was a draw, it was not an even game. I was outplayed at most points. I'll complain a little bit about, the Archer Horde and how the Mage doesn't fail Bane Chance and how Dracon Riders are so hard to respond to, but at the end of the day, I need to make very clear that my opponent moves very carefully. He does not pivot a unit, but that he checks everything in its line of sight. Before he charges a unit, he does a little bit of mental math hammer to make sure that he's got a pretty good chance of breaking it on the charge, and he knows what he's going to do once he charges them. So, and that's something that I don't do as well. You can see with the Berserkers regiment I put up behind that tower near the archers, that I sometimes just put something somewhere, and I haven't thought properly about what's going to happen. I haven't recognised that, I need another pivot for that or something. So, although it was fought to a draw, at the end of the game, my opponent really did outplay me, and I need to congratulate him for that. So, a bit of an analysis of what happened in this game. Well, in regards to my list, I'm happy about the changes. The shooters are definitely better in a horde. I think I mentioned that once or twice. The warriors in a horde with the two-handed weapons, I also liked that. So even though in this game they didn't actually do anything, they survived the first punch. They took the 11 damage and they held, like they wavered. If it had been a regiment, it would have folded immediately and the Dracon Riders would have got a pivot. And, you know, if we had played with correct, absolute correct perfect rules knowledge, I would have been able to get the charge with Grok Agenwalk and punish them. Still, like, I'm pretty happy with having a unit that can take a direct charge from the Dracon Riders and not immediately fold. I think I prefer it that way. Things I didn't do well. That Archer Elven Horde, I again failed to get up in their faces and smack them about. And that is what they need desperately. They desperately need to be punched. They really do. Part of that is just the lack of speed I have. And the speedy things I did have tended to get shot and punched and all sorts of things before they could cause mischief. So that is something I need to fix. I need to have something that I can use to counter those archers right at the back there. I'm also struggling with how to respond to all of the fast things my opponent has. 2 speed 9 heavy cav units and a flyer horde. I need to play so conservatively because he absolutely can pick his combats. He can choose where the fights are going to happen. And all of his units hit really hard with elite. Well, most of their attacks are hitting. And ogres, they have a relatively low nerve. So, still thinking about what to do. I'm thinking from a list building perspective, boomers are a possibility. I'd like to put more of them in because they might be able to respond well to the flyers and to respond well to being flanked. I also thought that possibly castling a bit more. So if I'm just going to build almost a little formation where everything's supporting everything else and don't move forwards, if we have about equivalent firepower, which we did, the Archer Horde to my shooters, then he's probably going to want to come to me. Because if I come to him, I'm going to, spread out or give him flanks or give him rear opportunities or let his flyers get over me. But if I castle up, maybe that would give me options. I'm not sure. It's just an idea. Post your comments below, by all means. Please enlighten me as to how, as an Ogre player, I'm going to handle all this really fast stuff. And that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed watching. I definitely enjoyed playing the game and enjoyed making this video. And I'll see you next time. Bye!